Welcome back to the program, everyone. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm excited to be here with you today. We're going to do another episode on certain kinds of drugs that are used in weight management, and we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, I want you to hit the subscribe button somewhere down below here. I can't remember if it's left or right, but hit it down below so that you don't miss another episode. And also, don't forget to check me out on my other channels at The Official Dr. Dan. So one of my previous videos that I did on Ozempic and how it's going to be starting to use in weight loss was a big hit. You guys really liked it. And I certainly did appreciate all the kind and wonderful comments and you guys sharing your stories and telling me that, yeah, I apparently did a pretty good job of explaining it for you. And it's good to know that I can still make my mother proud with the decade of university and all the pharmacist training that I did and really make the 3 pieces of paper that are hanging up in my office here totally worth it, along with the mortgage-sized debt that I currently have. I'm really hoping that maybe the University of Alberta will name a classroom, maybe give me a bench or something like that with my name on it. I feel like I've paid for it at this point, but I'll keep you guys posted, all right? But I digress. So Ozempic isn't the only weight loss medication that's currently on the market. And today I want to talk about Contrave. Contrave is like the new old kid on the block, if you will. And what do I mean by that? Well, Contrave itself is newish to the market, especially the Canadian market, but it's actually made up of 2 drugs that have been around for quite some time. The first drug is Bupropion, and some of you might know this as Wellbutrin when it's used for depression, or Zyban when it's used for a smoking cessation aid. And the other component is Naltrexone, or Revia. And so basically what happened was there was a couple of geniuses that realized that naltrexone and bupropion, when separate, could lead to potentially some weight loss. And so they got the brilliant idea and they said, well, more is better, right? And they were right. When they combined the 2 together, we saw a greater amount of weight loss. So I'm hoping somebody at least got a promotion or a raise for kind of coming up with this new idea and this new medication combo, if you will. So what is bupropion? Bupropion is a norepinephrine and a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So norepinephrine and dopamine are called neurotransmitters. And what I mean by that is that, well, in our brain we have neurons, and our neurons are close together, but they don't actually touch. And so we need these neurotransmitters to go between them in order to send the signal from one neuron to the next. And what these neurotransmitters do is they help to regulate our mood, our concentration, our focus, attention, and in some cases our ability to move and that sort of thing. So when I say that bupropion is a norepinephrine and dopamine reuptake inhibitor, what I'm saying there is that bupropion essentially acts like a plug and will plug a pump that would normally retake up the norepinephrine and dopamine from between those neurons. And essentially what happens then is that if it's plugged, nothing's getting taken up, so further it gets concentrated between the neuronal synapses, they call it, and when there's a higher concentration, you, in theory, get more activity. So norepinephrine, I always like to say, is kind of like a sister molecule to adrenaline or epinephrine, and when it works in the brain, what it's helping with is focus, attention, and our energy levels. Dopamine, on the other hand, is often referred to as our reward hormone. And it gets released, when my parents give me that attaboy for not flunking out of college, when you eat good food, when you have sex, pretty much when you do anything that feels good, dopamine is going to be involved in that reward pathway because it wants you to feel good. That situation felt good in the moment and it wants to reinforce it and have you do it again. Basically, the brain kind of gets really excited when the dopamine comes around because it's like, hey, that felt really good. Whatever it is that you just did there, that felt great. Let's do that again. And then the behavior gets repeated and reinforced. And so every time you repeat it, you get that reinforcement of dopamine and you do it over and over and over again until it becomes essentially a habit or something that you crave and want in your life. Really think about Pavlov's dog here, right? The dog that when you rang the bell, it started drooling because it was associating the bell with a treat. Yeah, same kind of thing with humans. And before you say anything, yes, humans really are as simple and reward-driven as animals. So dopamine also helps with our attention, our memory, our motivation, and our ability to move. So maybe now you can kind of see how bupropion might have a role in managing our mood as well as our food-seeking behaviors. Essentially, it can help to decrease our wanting and our drive for food, but it can also help with our attention and our motivation around wanting to change our behaviors and our patterns. Now, bupropion does come in a few different formulations. Essentially, bupropion itself is still the same in each of these formulations, but what we're changing is the kinetics, or how long the drug maybe lasts in your body, how it peaks in your body, and that sort of thing. So there's an immediate release formulation. There's also a extended release formulation, or Bupropion XL, some of you might see it as, and this is Wellbutrin. And then there's a Bupropion SR formulation, and there's a sustained release formulation. So it doesn't act quite as long as the XL formulation. Usually we dose it twice a day versus once a day compared to the XL formulation, but you kind of get the point. In Contrave, there is the SR formulation. So generally that's why we do Contrave. It's usually 1 tablet in the morning and 1 tablet at night. So maybe you've heard of the opioid crisis, where paramedics, firefighters, physicians, all the people that are working in the medical field are saving individuals that are overdosing on opioids with naloxone, maybe. Maybe you've heard it in the sense of alcohol use disorder. Naltrexone is essentially a sister drug to naloxone. So what it is it's an opioid antagonist. Kind of like how Darth Vader was an antagonist to Luke Skywalker. Yeah, that's what I kind of mean. So naltrexone blocks or opposes opioids at the opioid receptors within our bodies, except with a little bit less of a father-son lightsabering your head off kind of thing. And I've been waiting for an opportunity to insert a Star Wars analogy into one of my videos, so this is a very exciting day. Anyways, so what do opioids and Darth Vader have to do with obesity and weight loss? Well, you see, our bodies naturally produce endogenous opioids, or opioids that come from our body, and we call these endorphins. You know those crazy people that are constantly going for the runner's high and will run and run and run and run like literally crazy people? Yeah, they're just getting hopped up on their own personal opioids. And when it comes to food and eating, our opioid receptors play a role in our liking of food. So when you finally get to eat that glorious pizza, your opioid receptors are going to play a role in how much you actually like that pizza and how much you enjoy the taste and the feel of it in your mouth. And just a fun fact for you guys, our endocannabinoid receptors also play a role in our liking of food. So the human body also produces endogenous cannabinoids, cannabinoids that you get from smoking weeds. Our body produces molecules similar to those naturally in the body. And when you hang out with Mary Jane, that tends to activate your endocannabinoid receptors and increases your liking of food. So any of you that have hung out with Mary Jane and you've gotten the munchies, and then you've ended up in your friend's pantry crushing a box of Chips Ahoy cookies and crackers and no-name gummies, you kind of know what I'm talking about. No? You don't? Yeah, me neither, especially if my mother's watching this. Yeah, no idea. Anywho, when we have naltrexone in our system, what's ultimately happening there is it's blocking the opioid receptors, and so it's going to decrease how much you like the food that you're eating. So when you get that glorious pizza, it might not taste and be as good as what you remember it being in the past. Therefore, you may not want or crave that pizza as much in the future. That's kind of the idea we're going for. So what about naltrexone and bupropion together? Why did they combine them together? Why don't we just have naltrexone or bupropion being offered on the market all by themselves? Now, as I said, there's some evidence that naltrexone and bupropion on their own can certainly lead to some weight loss. Naltrexone about 1.2% from baseline, and bupropion about 2.7% from baseline, roughly or so for each of the individual drugs. What we find, though, is that when we combine the drugs together, we seem to get some kind of synergistic effect. Meaning we see an even greater weight loss when the two are used together, approximately 5.7% from baseline, compared to either one being used alone. I know, that's pretty neat, right? So not only do they have their individual activities that they're doing, but together they seem to have some additional benefit or activity that they work on. Now, the intricacies as to how the two work together and help us in managing our weight and have that synergistic effect isn't entirely clear. We know what I described already does play a role, however, there seems to be another mechanism. And this other mechanism seems to happen in first the hypothalamus, which is kind of our appetite regulatory center. And there's also something else going on in our mesolimbic dopamine circuit, or our reward center of our brain. Specifically, bupropion seems to activate what's called the pro-opiomelanocortin, or the POMC neurons in the hypothalamus. That was a big word. And naltrexone seems to reinforce bupropion's activity at the POMC neurons. And what we know is that when the POMC neurons are activated, we get a decrease in our appetite, and we also get an increase in energy expenditure. So in general, you get up and you just burn and move more energy kind of thing. In practice, I found my clients really note that they're able to be more mindful with their choices. They're kind of able to slow down and to be able to pick the apple over the apple pie more frequently, if you will. And what I believe is happening here is that when we reduce your appetite, we're actually increasing your executive functioning or the decision maker of your brain so that when your executive functioning goes up, you're better able to make that choice of the apple over the apple pie. Now, there's been a few studies that have been done looking at the weight loss benefits of Contrave in a number of different populations, everything from people with diabetes to obesity to a few other things as well. One study that I want to focus on in particular, which I believe is pretty close to my practice in terms of what they did with lifestyle interventions, I think gives a good example of what is possible not only on the placebo side, but what Contrave, the medication, can add to an individual that is working on these lifestyle interventions as well. So a study by Wadden and friends, basically they used Contrave in conjunction with an intensive lifestyle changes that included diet, exercise, and behavior counseling and modification. And Wadden et al. Found that there was an 11.3% reduction in weight from baseline with the Contrave and intensive exercise group compared to 7.3% in the placebo group that was just doing the intensive lifestyle changes. And this data was derived from the individuals that completed the full 56-week trial that they had done. So what this really shows is that intensive lifestyle changes and behavior changes can certainly lead to a reduction in weight, 7.3%, but when we add Contrave onto it, we get an even further reduction. So Contrave adds something more to it to allow for a greater amount of weight loss to occur. Now, it wasn't quite as wild as what we were seeing with Ozempic in my previous video and almost getting like a 20% weight loss, but it still is an impressive result nonetheless. Now, I know this is a bit of a longer video, so congratulations on staying with me. We're just going to do a couple of final points here that, based on my previous video and questions that came up, I know you guys are probably going to have. The first aspect, side effects. So in this study that I mentioned by Wadden and friends, nausea was the biggest thing. And in general, with all the studies, nausea is primarily what they saw with upwards of 20% of people. Generally, this was a transient side effect, so it goes away after your body gets used to the medication. However, some people did notice as well that there was constipation, dry mouth, sweating, diarrhea, and headaches too. Generally, these were also transient. Some of them kind of stuck around, such as the sweating. It was kind of an ongoing thing, and some people it resolved in them, but those were some of the other side effects that were noted in these studies. And like I said, your body generally gets used to them and they go away after a period. And it's also why we start with a slow titration of the drug. So when we're titrating the drug up for you, we start with 1 tablet once a day for 7 days, and then we go to 1 tablet twice a day for 7 days, and then we go to 2 tablets in the morning and 1 tablet at night for 7 days. And then finally we get up to 2 and 2 on a day-to-day basis, for the total dose of being 360/32 milligrams of Bupropion to Naltrexone. A few other important mentions here. If you are taking opioids at all, this medication is completely contraindicated for you. You need to be talking to your doctor before you even go near this medication because naltrexone blocks the opioid receptor and causes all kinds of issues if you are taking opioids. As well, if you have a history of seizures, this is again something you need to talk to your family physician and doctors about before you go anywhere near this medication because bupropion has been demonstrated to lower the seizure threshold or make it easier for you to have a seizure. Now, generally, there's extenuating circumstances that come around that, but each patient needs to be evaluated on an individual-to-individual basis as to whether this drug would be safe and effective for them. So, as always, this is purely for medical education, and you need to follow up with your primary healthcare team. But overall, this is an effective drug in obesity management, and it can also be beneficial if you have a concurrent mood disorder as well, such as depression or anxiety. It can concurrently help to manage and treat that and ultimately move you in the direction that you're trying to go in terms of managing your weight as well. And I've had some patients that have had really great success on it, and I've had some that have even added it to their regimen when they're already on Ozempic or Saxenda as kind of an extra boost for further benefit and further weight loss as another potential option. So in reality, there's lots of possibilities. There's lots of new meds that are coming to the market in terms of managing weight. It's very, very exciting. And so if you think Contrave might be an option for you, definitely talk to your family physician, your primary care team, and get the full story and just make sure that you are being as safe as possible.